So welcome everyone to the next program in the Berkeley Law Career Series for students. And again, Wilson Sonsini has been kind enough to lend us a couple of their experts to talk about the fast-changing world of student recruiting for law firms, for 1Ls, for 2Ls. The two experts we have today, fortunately, once again, come from different markets, and we'll let them introduce that piece of it. But we want to show that this isn't necessarily a California thing. This isn't a Texas thing. It isn't an East Coast thing. Things are changing everywhere. There may be some oddities here and there, but a lot of the changes are pretty similar across. And if you've watched any other of these programs, I'm going to tell you, if you think that your market might be different, the person you always ask is the expert in that market, and that's going to be the recruiter that's driving that market. They know what's really happening. But for the most part, the high level is pretty similar. And I think the similarity is it's changing everywhere. So today we have Cherie Beffa from Wilson out of the California offices in Robert and Schallert. I want to start off with, I think it's important that we know where we are in time. Today, we're in early February 2024. And that's important because mid-June 2024 might look entirely different. And that's because the old rules that made every law firm and every law school behave exactly the same don't exist anymore. Now firms, now law schools get to do kind of what they want. Is that a fair statement, Robin, Cherie?
I think that's definitely fair. I think it's a whole new world right now, and it's evolving every single day, sometimes every single minute. But yeah, it's not on-campus interviewing as it used to be back in the day.
So I think that's important because a lot of these students I've only heard about OCI. It's a new crop of students. They've heard about OCI, these big events, in hotels where you could go through and you can see 20 firms at once, and at the end of the day or end of the week, people hand you your offers, very regimented. What's different now?
Okay, let's level the playing field too about what we're talking about. So, when we're talking about, interviewing right now, we're typically talking about interviewing for a summer position after your second year of law school. So, when you talk about on-campus interviewing, it's almost always talking about the job that you're looking for after your second year of law school. So where you spend your second summer. And so all law schools are going to host an on-campus interview program. And you're right, Wayne. It used to be in hotels, it used to be in person, but then the pandemic hit and introduced us all to virtual interviewing. And so now what you're going to find is all early interviewing, all on-campus interviewing, that's all going to take place virtually. I think very few places are doing that in person. And again, this is today, February 1st, things can change again. So, we'll call it what it is right now. But, it's looking at the on-campus process and it's virtual. So we even call it on-campus, even though it's virtual. It's more like the virtual interview process.
So really we're in our third generation of recruiting, from the old days where planes were a huge part and students missed their first 10 days of class, to all getting very comfortable with Zoom or whatever platform, Microsoft platform, that's being used by most of the law firms.
Yep, that's right. And so this new world, offers us, so much more, I think, so much more opportunity because, with this new Wild West starting, so, you've got interviews taking place now. You have interviews taking place in early June, late June, July. This whole season is now expanded. And what's nice is because it's virtual, you can do it from anywhere. So, even if you're interested in, let's say, the DC market, but you live in California, what's nice is, you could spend 30 minutes on the phone with somebody and have your virtual interview, which is fantastic. I think it opens up more opportunities for people.
Yeah, and that's one of those things, we've talked about in other programs, if you're interviewing in another market, you need to make sure you're prepared for those questions about why you're interviewing in that market. Just because it's easier doesn't mean the questions are any easier or any less important. The logistics are easier. Well, the old OCI where it was in the hotel, you did it all in person, had a set schedule. then with COVID, it had a set schedule. There was timing. Everybody kind of started in the fall. It kind of crept earlier, but at least there was timing. But
Yes.
now there's this ambiguous early recruiting. And I hear stories. I hear good stories. I hear horrible stories. What is early recruiting?
Essentially any, oh, sorry.
Go for it, Robin.
Essentially any recruiting before their OCI, their school's OCI. So even before we have a Bay Area Diversity Career Fair, before Loyola Patent Fair, it's any interviewing earlier than that. Sometimes it's specialty groups, sometimes it's from summits that we see candidates or built relationships throughout the year, just getting to know them and their interest in the firm and really getting to know us and wanting to interview and wanting to fully go through the process before OCI even happens.
So I heard a couple of things there that I think are worth pointing out. There are some formal things you'll see, like career fairs, that trigger, hey, this is a formal thing. Bring a resume. It's formal. We're going to meet people. It's kind of an interview to get to that next stage. But you also brought up some things that don't sound so formal, that seem like places that offers are at least considered or discussed or foundation set. Am I missing something there?
No, I'd say it's a foundation for the next stage of any process. You know, we're getting to know students at every event that we're going to. Sometimes they follow up with us and they say, I saw your talk at Berkeley, or I saw your talk at UCI and I really want to get to know you. And I want to see, you talked about AI, or you talked about ECES, or, the changing climate. It would be great to get to know you. And that's kind of, and then they build those relationships and then it moves on to the next step, depending on what they want and what the schools allow and kind of where we are in the process.
So it seems like early recruiting is, again, not a single event. It's a long, maybe drawn out process over time for many. Maybe a little bit of judgment there on my part. It used to be you showed up in August, September, and spent that week and you were done. But now it starts earlier with these, I'll call them meet and greets, getting to know people, building connections. Okay.
I think that's right. There's also, though, there are formalized interview programs, early interview programs. At Wilson, we have our ACE program, which is our accelerated consideration for employment. And so it's very formalized, very transparent. We tell you when applications are open. We tell you when we're going to do our on-campus interview, our early virtual interviews, which is similar to OCI. And we tell you what to expect during the process. And you're going to find a few firms that have, very formalized early interview programs. But at the same time, you also have a lot of firms, and I don't think there's going to be any firm out there that isn't going to take an application from somebody early. And so it's kind of like thinking about early interviewing as the, the early admissions, deadlines, the early application programs for colleges, right? So, the early deadlines. If you apply to us early, we'll get you an answer earlier. And so that's kind of how you want to think about early interviewing. It's your chance to get into the pipeline sooner, so that you can have an answer sooner, and so that you're considered earlier, and that you can get back to your summer job and get back to law school studies and the like. So it's kind of really for those people who know what they want and are ready to act. That's how you want to think about early interviewing. It's not really just moving up this whole lottery effect earlier. It's really thinking about a focused search when you are ready to take that leap.
So maybe one way to describe this at the very highest level is your law school used to tell you what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. And now it's much more of a free market. As the student, it's really your responsibility to know what firms you're interested in, what practices you're interested in, and how to reach out to those firms. Is that fair?
I think that's really fair, 100% on point. And, and I think what students want to think about is, what bucket do you fit in? Who are you? What do you want? And I think the first thing that you need to decide is, where do you want to practice, in terms of geography? Because I do think that you need to figure out what market you're interested in, so that you could figure out where your search is going to take you from there. And once you've answered the question, what market I want to be in, then I think your next question is, do I know what I want to do? What kind of law do I want to practice when I join a law firm? And some students are going to say, I don't know. And what I'm going to do is use the summer program to figure that out, because I'm really not going to be prepared by the time we get to June or July or even August to make that decision. So then what you'll want to do is focus your search on what law firms have a rotation program. And so that's working with your career service office. That's talking to the law firms in that market that you've now whittled down your search to find out who has a rotation program and who doesn't. And then you want to look at then, and if you're the other person and you say, okay, I want to do patent litigation. So now I know I want to be in, Los Angeles, and what firms have patent litigation in Los Angeles. So this will help you focus your search and then figure out how to approach the process. But, I think that early interviewing is really for those people who have narrowed that search down to one of those two criterias and are ready to act on it. If you absolutely have no idea what you want to do, then you should wait for OCI, because you will do better in that process than you will in early interviewing, because early interviewing is really students making a decision earlier and firms making a decision earlier. We're all committed to moving this process along faster.
Well, and I guess I would add one, maybe shameless plug, but look at the law schools are often, and I know I do lots of these programs where I bring law firms in, lawyers from different practices, so students can start learning what's the difference between a privacy transactional practice and a privacy litigation practice. So you need to look and see if any of those resources are available at your school or here as part of the career series. Look and see how people describe these practices to you. There's a lot of information out there, and one thing I've learned about lawyers is they love to talk about what they do. Most of them love what they do. They've picked a place, and if you start them talking about what they do, you may get more information than you ever wanted, but you can live with it. So use those opportunities to find out some things. Don't wait for an OCI. Don't wait for an early interview process. Just start asking, because firms want you to be happy, schools want you to be happy, and how you make your choices. And if you're a transactional lawyer and you show up in patent litigation, you're not going to enjoy it. As a patent litigator, I can firmly say there are differences between those that want to do trial lawyer work and those that want to do transactional work. Some would say those that want to blow things up, and others that want to build things. It's a personality issue. Best way to figure it out is talk to people and ask.
Yeah, so, and I definitely think you want to be strategic about that, thinking about, say you do pick your geography or your practice that you're interested in, making sure those things align and making sure you're being strategic about who you're reaching out to, because you don't necessarily want to reach out to 100 different lawyers at the same law firm. You want to really think about, okay, maybe I'll start with the junior, and maybe I'll start with the recruiter and figure out who's the best person given my specific interests, and really move from there. Because I think otherwise you'll bombard a specific maybe firm, or bombard a ton of attorneys who are like, I don't know what this person's asking. So you do want to be strategic about it.
Well, and what you said, one thing there is music to my ears. Students don't use recruiters enough. The folks in the recruiting department know so much. You talk to one lawyer knows the world of one lawyer. My experience in big law is that often the recruiting department, and especially the people on the ground in my office, knew more about me than I knew about me, and knew at the practice and knew how to match people up and explain things, and were incredible resources. So everybody wants to talk to a partner. I hear students say, let me talk to a partner. Partners are probably the least relevant in your decision-making process. You want to talk to recruiters, people in year 3, 4, 5, somewhere in that range, to understand what your practice as a student is going to look like. And your beginning practice is going to look nothing like the practice of a 25-year partner. So again, I every time I do this, I tell students over and over, the recruiting department is your friend. Don't steer clear of them.
Well, thank you. We appreciate that, Wayne, because we are here to help. I mean, that is our goal. And I also want to make sure that students know that it's okay not to know during your 1L year what you want to do. And it's okay to ask, Robin, can you set me up with a partner or an associate or somebody who can explain the difference to me between I have this life science degree and I'm not quite sure what I want to do with it. I think I want to focus on tech trans, but I'm not really sure what, patent prosecution is. I mean, totally different things, but can you walk me through what your day might look like? And so can you match me with somebody so I can help figure this out? And so I think that's really what students need to do, is talk to as many people, as Robin said, to really figure out what you want to do with your degrees.
So with any big change comes the important question, why? Why are firms changing? Why are law schools changing? I mean, how did this happen in a 12, 18-month time period?
We've always done early interviewing at Wilson Sonsini. That for us, we have a very unique client base, and we look for people with life science and tech backgrounds and people who want to work with our clients. And so for us, it's always been a little bit of an early matching program, because there are a lot of people who want to do startup work, or a lot of people that want to work with our particular client base. And so students have always reached out to us early. We've always seen them early, and it tends to work out well for us, because we're able to match people's interests earlier on, and we tend to have people accept offers and higher rates because they're interested in what we do and they're seeking us out. I think that's harder for some jobs. It's not always that easy, but for us, we've always done it. We've always liked it. The reason the world has changed, though, is because the guidelines kind of went out the window, and we all used to say that we would wait until August to see candidates, and then some schools moved their programs up early, some kept them late, and it's just this free-for-all right now. But I do think that what everybody has figured out, though, is that it's good for the students who know what they want and are ready to make a move to interview early, because that also helps out the classmates who aren't ready to make that choice, because there are a certain number of callbacks that will happen, certain number of offers that will happen. And a lot of times we're all interested in the same people, but they're not always going to match for us. So it's kind of good to have some people who are out of the process early because they've already made their decisions. That opens up the rest of the field for everybody else who hasn't quite figured it out yet. And then we can make real determinations on those candidates as well. So it's not horrible if you don't know what you want to do immediately. Just don't do early interviewing if you don't know what you want. If you're doing early interviewing because you think you should, because now there's this pressure to do this, don't. That's the wrong reason. The only reason you do early interviewing is if you're ready to act and ready to make a decision. OCI still exists, and I think that you're seeing that some law schools haven't decided what they want to do. Some law schools are going to have a June program, and some are going to have a second program in July. And that's very intentional, because some people won't be ready for the June program, and yet firms are still going to need to hire people. And so there will be opportunities in July. So you just need to know that you have to pick which lane you want to be in. But I would never approach early interviewing as the same way that I would with OCI. Because in OCI, the schools are going to tell you should bid on 20 to 30 firms and interview with all of them and kind of figure out what that might look like. That's great if you don't know what you want to do, and then you're going to figure it out as you go along. But, for those of us who know we want to recruit people with life science backgrounds or tech backgrounds, we want them earlier in the process so that we can match them with the attorneys who they're going to be working with potentially. And like I said, it's easier for us to do those matches.
Well, there are a couple of firms, and you're definitely not in this group, but there are a couple of firms that have created some, I would call, artificial fear, that said, they came in and said, hey, we're going to hand out early offers, and we've got 15 offers to hand out. And once our class is full, it's full. If we make it to OCI, great. We'll hire people out of OCI, but we probably won't last that long. People want to work here. And that's created a lot of fear and stress that OCI is no longer relevant. If you want to work for the top firms, you want to work for specialty firms, all those offers are going to be gone. All the opportunities are going to be gone. How do you respond to a student that has that kind of fear? And again, well earned fear because there are firms saying that.
I think they should talk to other firms. They should talk to other recruiters. Find out what's going on, see what they should be doing, how they can get more intel into each firm. Because if they're only listening to one firm, then they're putting themselves at a disadvantage. They should reach out, figure out what's going on at other places. Is this really a fact? Can I still interview? Or, what's going to happen? What if, I don't make grades for this firm? Or if I don't do this, like they really need to do the research. They really need to start talking to people and get out there and see what is really happening. Because I think there are a lot of fear tactics happening and people are kind of freaking out that things are happening this early. But I think kind of take a breath and really do the research and talk to people. I think networking is key here. Figure out what's happening.
Well,
And I think, go ahead. Sorry, Wayne, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Cherie.
I was going to say the one thing is I think that it is true that there are going to be some practices at some firms that there are very limited opportunities, that they might only be looking for one summer associate in that particular practice group. And so it is important to know what those opportunities look like if those are the opportunities that you're looking for, because that's when the fear tactic may be less of a tactic and just more truth, right? That it just might be factual, though we only have one slot. And if we find that great person early, then yes, you might miss out. But what you need to do is really understand, once you've decided where you want to be, is look at the numbers. And then you can see, how many summer associates are they hiring into that market, and how many, across different firms into those different practice areas, and help get your, help build more information for yourself, get more knowledge base.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because the more specialized practice, I want to do tax transactions. Well, that's a specialized practice. Firms are only going to have a few slots for those every year in particular markets. But if you already know that that's the area you're interested in, you're the perfect candidate for the early interview process. You've already done things, rather than say, well, I might want to do corporate, I might want to do litigation. Both corporate and litigation aren't going to fill up at most firms, but
exactly.
Tax might.
Tax might.
I think one other thought is, if you want to go into a specific geography, I think you need to start talking to your career services earlier, just because some of the offices might not be hiring as many summer associates. And so you want to get in early to say, like, hey, I'm interested in, say, Seattle, or I'm interested in, Austin, and I really want to be there. Or, I see you have a Wilmington office, and how do I get into that? And how many summers are going to be there? How do I do that early? Knowing those markets, it's different in each market. So I think it's important to also navigate that as well.
That's a great point that I think is often overlooked, that people are thinking about firms instead of markets within firms. I spent most of my life in the Boulder market of a big Silicon Valley firm. We recruited differently. Boulder was its own unique place to recruit. I mean, it's its own unique place in lots of ways, but everybody was coming in from the outside, and we rarely went through OCI. So this idea of early recruiting isn't necessarily new, but people were applying to us because we were unique. No one was going to Madison, Wisconsin to do OCI back then. So it's a good idea to ask. And you think the recruiting department at the law school can often help you with market specific information?
Yeah, or give you advice. I know some schools do, like, if you're interested, say you're going to a law school in California and you want to get into Austin, you should reach out to your career services to say, hey, how should I go about this? I know that, they'll know that the market is different in Texas. And so it would be good to connect with them, and then they can connect you with a recruiter, or you can look up the recruiter in that office and go from there. But I do think it's important to talk with your career services still to figure out, like, is this a niche market that I need to worry about getting in before OCI?
Well, the next question kind of builds on that, both from geography and office size, and that's, how many firms should you do early recruiting with? Because OCI, like you said, you can do 24. There really is no downside. Especially now, they're virtual interviews, and you don't even have to find a place to park like the old days. It's just that you can just roll through them. But it doesn't seem like early recruiting is a place to reach out to 30 firms.
I would 100% agree with that. I would think that early interviewing is really, 5 to 10 max. I mean, you really should be focused on a set number of firms and why you're interested in them, or it's a market. So, okay, if I'm interested in Boulder, what are all the firms in Boulder and what are my opportunities there? And why do I want to be there? So, I think it's very focused depending on where you're at. Obviously in New York, there are so many choices. So maybe you could, expand your search a little bit more, but at the same time, you should really, if you're in the market for early interviewing, you should know why you're in that market, and you should know why you're doing it, and you should have a better sense of what firms you want to be at. And so either it's, like I said, it's the firms that are going to allow you to rotate. You want to be at one of these firms because they are going to let you rotate, or you want to be at one of these firms because they will let you go specifically into, a specific practice. That's why you're interviewing with them. And then you want to look at the client base. And so now you've made that decision. So, what kind of clients do you want to work for? And so then you need to do your research and talk to the career service office, talk to attorneys at those different law firms and find out about their client base. And then also find out about what kind of opportunities those firms are going to afford you. But, I think there's just a lot to go off of, but you should narrow that search. You should find ways to narrow the search so that it is a limited number of firms. In the same way that if you, do an early action program in college, that's really reserved for a couple of law schools, right? Or a couple of undergrads. It's not intended to canvass the market. That's because that's a firm, if you have an offer from, you're going to go. And that's kind of how you should look at early interviewing.
So I guess one of the things about early interviewing that could be overwhelming is trying to understand what law firms really offer. And I'll throw it out there. Most law firm websites are not a model of clarity. They're not meant for students. I'm not sure what they're meant for. I've told people frequently, I go back and read the bio the marketing department wrote for me when I was a partner. I'm like, that guy did a lot of stuff. I wish I knew how to do that. Like, a one-time event becomes an expertise. They're meant for bringing in clients and maybe not running, making sure that you'll at least get the phone call and the ability to pitch or connect with some other partner. They're not meant for students to understand what the average partner, what the average group does day to day. And you can go to, go ahead. No.
I was just going to say, I would totally agree with you. We've actually have a careers website now specifically geared to for people that are looking for jobs. And it's supposed to help you find your path, what you want to do, where you want to do it, and like figure out, are you hiring in Boulder? Are you hiring in Wilmington? These smaller areas that maybe you didn't know we were hiring in. So we definitely did that because we found that the website was confusing for students. They were like, you have this person in this office that does this. Why aren't you hiring for it? And I was like, well, there's one person in that office doing that. But so it's definitely confusing and it's hard for students to navigate. So we created something for that.
Well, and the new trend of law firms not really telling you where lawyers are or not in the website's even more fun. I'll look people up. Okay, what's your phone number? And then run it against the zip code. Okay, there's where you're at. Okay, I understand. Or they work in 6 offices. No, you don't. No, you don't. So it's really hard to figure things out from a website, vaults. I mean, there's no reliable source. So if you want to make good decisions for early recruiting, what do you do? How do you go about it?
Meet as many people as possible, talk to as many law firms as possible as you can. There are I can't even imagine how many different employer events are on campus every single week. And you need to attend as many of those as possible, because honestly, as a 1L, it's going to be really hard to figure this out. And so you need to educate yourself. And every single one of those meet the employer events is actually intended to help you and ask questions. I would ask junior people what they're working on, what they're working on right now, what they worked on, what they worked on last week. What does it look like to be you as a junior associate, to kind of figure out, how do I see my practice developing, and how do I see myself in the future? But it's asking as many questions. A lot of firms are doing different podcasts, and they're offering different practice focused events, trying to help educate students on what it means to be a privacy attorney, what it means to do patents and innovations, what it means to do corporate life science. There's lots of different programs out there to help students figure out what they want to do. And at the same time, it'll give them insights into what that law firm might look like. But it's doing a lot of research. It's asking a lot of questions and meeting as many people as possible, talking to professors for sure, and talking to adjuncts. And, again, it's connections. This is a people industry.
Well, and it Berkeley, our instructor, the adjunct population, comes from so many different law firms. It's a great place to learn and ask. When I push students that I'm counseling to think about, don't tell me what you think a firm is. Be able to answer the question, why is firm A different from firm B? And then you can start that compare and contrast and understand. We had a great event with Wilson, a Wilson transaction practice and a Gibson transaction practice next to each other. And those practices, for those that have been in the industry, we all know, look nothing alike. They have the same title. They look the same on the website, but the client base is radically different. You're looking at Fortune 25 versus emerging companies. The responsibilities at year 3 are radically different. And to tell you how difficult it's got to be for students, we had 2 partners, kind of mid-level partners, that were talking to each other about, hey, how do you get clients? No, how do you get clients? And it was really interesting to watch the differences in those firms. And then the students walked away understanding for the first time, I thought they registered, that's what it means to work for emerging company. At year 2, I may be in charge of a small deal, as opposed to a $15 billion deal over here, where I'll get to be in charge of that at year 22. It's just depends on what you want to do. Both of them are perfect career paths, just kind of really, really different, but you can't tell from the websites. I challenge those students to go back and look at the 2 web pages for those 2 partners. And they wrote me an email saying they look interchangeable.
Yep.
So come to the event, learn to compare and contrast, and you'll find which firms are the same, which, in their markets, which ones look radically different. And client size is often a big indicator.
Absolutely.
So,
and also rely on their 3 L's and 2 L's at the law school, who have, other experiences with law firms as well. I mean, it's hard, because your point, that is exactly right. It's very, very different. Your practice is going to be very, very different at those 2 types of firms. And it's the hardest thing for a student to figure out.
well, then after you've learned a little, it seems like, I'm going to sound like a broken record, a good place to go back to is the recruiting department and say, hey, I've done this research. I've kind of come to this conclusion, right or wrong. Would there be somebody I could talk to understand what it's like to be a 3L in a tech transaction practice in the emerging company space? And if you start asking that question, first, would you be interested in answering that question for a typical student?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So,
we are going to put you in touch with people. As soon as we get those calls daily, and we have a countless number of attorneys who are willing to speak to you. So, I mean, that's the easy way to do it. And no question is really a dumb question to a recruiter. We've heard it all. And at the end of the day, our job is to help you. So just ask. If you feel like you have that dumb question, ask us the dumb question. You can even preface with, this may be a dumb question, but this is what I'm trying to figure out. And we'll help you. And that's okay. We don't hold it against you.
I will. Well, this is the old litigator in me. There are some dumb questions, and they're usually the ones that come with complete lack of preparation, lack of knowledge, because I couldn't figure something out is very different than, so what kind of work do you do? If you're going to ask people questions, ask them questions to direct your decision making, not just some big, broad question about what's your day look like. What kind of law do you practice? What kind of clients do you have? That you can find on the website. But if you get a chance to talk to somebody, dig in. I love one place, especially years 4 or 5, if people have moved from one firm to the next, which is pretty common. What's the difference between those two firms? Just sometimes it's geography. I moved from one geography to the other. Sometimes it's client size. Sometimes, it was 1-person group here. It's a 20-person group here. I was lonely over here. I feel like a team here. You find all sorts of things just by compare and contrast.
Yeah, I know we've definitely allowed even people that have left the firm, like if they went in-house, we've had someone who's left the firm, come back, went in-house, came back, went back in-house. And, I always go to him to be like, hey, will you talk to the student who's kind of trying to figure out what they want to do and they're interested in corporate, but they don't know the differences. And so we definitely get that kind of information, and we keep good relationships with a lot of our attorneys, even after they leave, so that we can connect them. And even if they're at a different firm, I mean, at the end of the day, we want the right match for not only us, but for the student as well.
Well, wonderful. I want to thank you again for sharing some time. And again, I'll make sure this is a date stamp, that this is February in 2024. My guess is by June, we'll be doing this again, figuring out what the next stage is. But the underlying advice isn't going to change. Do your research, know what you want to do, or know that you don't know. You just need to know yourself at this point in time and take a good hard look, or know that I've got 2 areas. I don't want to litigate, but do I want to do tech transactions or, emerging company work, but I want to work for small companies. Those are great things to narrow it down to. If you don't know if you want to do litigation or transactional work, OCI may be the place for you.
Yeah.
So thank you both for joining us, and we look forward to talking with you again soon.
Thanks,
Wayne.